revealed how 3 men tried to take her life, but fate surprised everyone in an incredible twist. Sarah stared at the stack of papers, her mind racing. The whispers around the hospital corridors became sharper, more cynical. "She'll never make it out of Maplewood," they snickered. It stung, the arrogance of privilege snaking into her thoughts. Here she was, at 29, a dedicated medical researcher toiling in the same town that seemed desperate to confine her, not just physically, but mentally. Balancing her father's worsening health with the unrelenting demands of her job felt like an impossible tightrope act. But her father's deteriorating condition loomed even larger, binding her to a legacy marked by loss. It wasn't just her father's diagnosis, it was her mother's, rendered invisible by the same disease. Sarah could almost hear her mother's distant voice. "Be strong, Sarah. Fight!" This mantra trapped her, vibrating against the walls of her soul. Can strength be found in familial duty? What if her duty cost her own aspirations? Private thoughts spiraled viciously, churning with solitude and obligation. She pressed her hands against her thighs, willing her body to calm, even though her pulse quickened. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The slight flicker of her computer screen caught her attention. An email from a prestigious university, the kind she'd dreamed of since her first research paper, invited her to present her findings. A mix of elation and dread washed over her. She was on the cusp of recognition, yet aware of the envy lurking within the shadows of her peers. Would they respect her, or would they conspire against her? The scowls of the 3 men flashed through her mind, those privileged souls who prized ambition over integrity. Would they succeed in their plans to overcome her, or would she become their scapegoat? As the stakes rose, so did the insidious doubts that clawed at her heart. The notion of being framed for something she never committed gnawed at her. What if they succeeded? What if this dream she clutched with both hands unraveled before her? Each tick of the clock echoed louder, drowning her self-assurances in waves of uncertainty. Her father's words whispered back, beckoning the better part of her. "Fight for what you believe in, Sarah." But could she still believe in herself when it felt like the walls were caving in and every breath tasted like betrayal? The hollowness in her chest expanded, threatening to swallow her whole. A shadow fell over her, and she turned to find that wise mentor watching her, a knowing smile playing upon his lips that felt like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. Yet, in that moment of solace, the weight of her family's name pressed harder on her shoulders. The culmination of her thoughts spiraled with the clarity of her father's hidden legacy, a potential fountain of support for groundbreaking research, revealing an unexpected edge in a world that sought to push her down. Would it be enough to shift her destiny? But just as she thought she could reclaim her narrative, the insistent chime of ambition and fear echoed within her. Torn between duty and desire, Sarah's world hung on the brink of chaos. If she chose to accept the past and enhance her future, what sacrifices would it cost her? And as the clock ticked down to her pivotal presentation, she trembled on the edge of reckoning. Would she stand strong, ready to confront her adversaries, or would she succumb to their insidious game? The morning of the presentation dawned bright and heavy. Sarah awoke with the sun spilling through the thin curtains, illuminating the tangled thoughts that felt weighty in her mind. Each beam felt like a spotlight, illuminating her choice to step into a role that could either eclipse her or elevate her. Today, she would reclaim her narrative. As she prepared, Sarah caught a glimpse of her reflection, her skin appearing pallid against the stark white walls. Was that doubt manifesting physically? She shook her head, resolute. The traditional route of submission didn't suit her. It was always a battle for those like her, those who dared to venture into environments controlled by privilege. She pulled on her blazer, feeling the fabric suffocate the doubts, holding in the fierceness that burned within her. The journey to the university unfolded before her like a scene from a movie, dramatic and forever pushing her toward that inevitable confrontation. The campus buzzed with a mix of ambition and anxiety, a stark contrast to her internal turmoil. She navigated the throngs of students and faculty, putting on the mask of confidence that felt increasingly heavy with every step. Those whispers from earlier echoed in her mind, mingling with her father's words, urging her to persevere. Once seated in the auditorium, Sarah glanced at her notes, but her mind went blank. The shuffling of papers and murmurs from the crowd faded, replaced by the pounding of her heart. She had spent countless hours polishing her research, but this felt different. This was not merely a presentation, this was a battle against the very naysayers who questioned her worth. Finally, the moment came. The moderator introduced her, and Sarah rose, nervously adjusting her blazer one last time. Mic in hand, she realized she had a choice, to speak from fear or from passion. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, gripping the podium as if it were a lifeline. Her voice broke the silence. Today, I stand not just as a researcher, but as a representative of all those who have struggled within systemic constraints. With every word, she found her footing as the audience's energy morphed into something more supportive. She shared her findings, ones born from unyielding commitment to unravel medical mysteries and inspired by the ghosts of her family. The three men's faces flickered in her mind, their disdain nothing more than a shadow against her vigor. As she dove deeper into her data, she began to sense a shift in the room, a murmur of respect that was laced with disbelief. Eagerness replaced skepticism, and Sarah felt the electric connection between her and her audience. She bared her vulnerability, recounting the emotional toll that propelled her research, the fears that had once threatened to derail her. But then, emerging amidst her triumph, was the distinct reminder of the stakes involved. The three men sat waiting, their disappointment palpable. She realized that presenting before them was not just a professional obligation, but a personal confrontation. They wanted to see her fail, to reduce her efforts to mere coincidence. The question burst forth unbidden. What if they tried to undermine her? The realization cut deeper. She could expose their treachery. She had learned enough about their schemes during her investigation of her family's legacy to secure leverage, but at what cost? With the final slide of her presentation complete, applause erupted, a beautiful cacophony washing over her doubts. Yet, as Sarah exited the stage, exhilaration battled dread within her. She had exposed her truth before an audience, but stood now on the brink of a greater challenge. Would she use the knowledge of their underhanded tactics to protect herself, or would that path lead her further into their maze of deceit? Adrenaline coursed through her, and she felt the ghosts of her decisions crowding in once again. The time had finally come to face those adversaries, and as shadows loomed larger on her horizon, Sarah's pulse quickened. This battle was just beginning. The auditorium's applause still echoed in Sarah's ears as she stepped backstage, her heart racing from the exhilaration of her performance and the looming uncertainty of what lay ahead. She leaned against a cold concrete wall, seeking a moment to collect her thoughts. Sweat clung to the back of her neck, and for a split second she considered the gravity of her next move. In the embrace of solitude, Sarah allowed herself to reflect. She had delivered her presentation with an intensity that surprised even her. Every word felt like an act of defiance against the naysayers. The three men she had placed in her mental crosshairs lingered like shadows, remnants of their dismissive glares and sarcastic comments haunting her mind. "What do I know?" she whispered to herself, battling the impulse to shrink back into anonymity. But somewhere beneath the barrage of doubts, she felt a flicker of clarity. Her research was substantive and impactful, built on years of dedication. They may have underestimated her resilience, but this time she wouldn't allow their skepticism to dictate her trajectory. As she stepped into the hallway, the atmosphere buzzed with the energy of the crowd as attendees networked and exchanged thoughts. Peering out, Sarah saw familiar faces and unfamiliar ones, all intermingling in a manner that reminded her of a scripted dance, one that she had thought she had to sit out. No more. Glimmers of opportunity sparked in her eyes. What if she could network, not just to validate her presence, but to fortify it? She breathed in deeply, recalling the strategies she had read about. No one thrived in isolation. The crowd parted as she approached a group of researchers engaged in animated discussions. Each smile and nod of acknowledgement stirred her boldness. She introduced herself, casting away the fear of rejection. Hi, I'm Sarah, she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. I'm researching the intersections of systemic bias in medical research. I just presented my findings. Surrounded by nods and inquiries, Sarah's trepidation slowly transformed into exhilaration. Engaging candidly about her work, she discovered shared interests, common frustrations, and a network of support. Each exchange built her confidence further. She was not an interloper, but a newcomer to a circle eager for diverse voices. Yet amidst this professional camaraderie, a darker intrigue pulled at her thoughts. She recalled the insights she had gathered regarding the three men, whispers of their underhanded dealings, the way they maneuvered behind closed doors. It struck her. She was armed with knowledge that could dismantle the facade they wore so comfortably. But unveiling their abuses could lead to a breach she was unsure she wanted to cross. Seeking justice often came with a cost. Could she endure the fallout? Would her ambition outweigh her fear, even if it thrust her deeper into battle? She turned away from the gathering as certainty forged through her indecision. It wasn't merely about continuing her research, it was about standing firm in her convictions. She envisioned a world where her voice was respected, not just tolerated. Clenching her hands, she gathered her resolve. The next phase of her journey demanded action, not just reaction. As she exited the building, a new determination filled her. She would confront the three men, not just for herself, but for all those who silently endured similar struggles. Today was a significant step, but it was merely the groundwork for something grander, a reckoning. Yet as her heart surged with ambitious plans, a notification pinged on her phone. Her breath caught as she read the message. It was from a trusted source, someone she had confided in about her research, and they had uncovered something monumental about the men she sought to confront. Her mind raced, spiraling into possibilities and dangers. This was a turning point, and she felt the weight of both dread and excitement swell within her. Now she had to decide. Would she confront them with the new intel, risking everything she had built, or tread cautiously and gather more evidence, despite the time it could take? As she walked into the night, the stakes were raised, and the shadows of her adversaries grew taller. The question loomed over her, pressing against her resolve. What did she truly want, and how much was she willing to sacrifice to achieve it? The streetlights flickered overhead, casting a warm glow that contrasted sharply with the cold steel resolve forming within Sarah. She leaned against the brick wall of the alley, her breath visible in the crisp evening air. The phone in her hand vibrated sporadically, the new intel burning a hole in her thoughts. This wasn't just a communication, it was ammunition, and with it came the weight of choice. Which path should she take? Confrontation resided at the forefront of her mind, mingling with fear of the possible fallout. Each option she contemplated danced like shadows against the darker thoughts of self-doubt. What if her inquiry led to more than she was prepared to handle? The stakes felt insurmountable, crossing into territory where she could become a target for retaliation. Yet the thought of continuing in silence while the men perpetuated their schemes gnawed at her conscience. Flashing back to her powerful presentation, she felt a surge of courage. That was her. The woman who stood tall, who spoke up, who ignited conversations. The echoing applause wasn't merely sound, it was affirmation. It reminded her that she possessed the strength needed for this moment. Nervously, Sarah glanced around, her mind racing through a list of strategic moves. She could gather more data, enlist allies, or confront the men directly. Each option had merits, but the weight of ambiguity made her ache for clarity. As she paced deeper into the alley, the soft quiet began to clear her head. Inspired by the energy she had felt in the auditorium, she decided to tap into the network she had begun to build. What if she contacted those who shared her interests? A few informal discussions around drinks could yield allies, voices that amplified her courage and provided a backing of collective experience. From prior conversations, she recognized at least 3 individuals who seemed to share her frustrations regarding the pervasive sexism in their professional landscape. They might also have insights that could bolster what she intended to unveil. With renewed energy, she extracted her phone, typing quickly. Hi, it's Sarah. Would love to chat more about our discussions at the auditorium. I'm gathering a few people to brainstorm strategies regarding systemic biases in medical research. Are you interested? She hesitated, finger hovering over send as trepidation wrapped its icy fingers around her resolve. but she dismissed it, sending the message into the digital ether. As she waited, adrenaline sparked throughout her veins, but it was different this time. This wasn't mindless excitement. It was purposeful, focused energy that directed her toward making a change. To confront her adversaries head-on, she needed allies. Not just allies, but empowered supporters who recognized their shared mission against injustice. Moments later, her phone vibrated again, illuminating with enthusiastic responses. Each message was a lifeline, an affirmation of her thoughts, her experiences within their shared spheres. Conversations started to bubble up in her mind, each with a unique angle, a symposium of thoughts, recommendations, and shared burdens. They could strategize, explore risks, and ultimately prepare for the confrontation. Suddenly she froze. A thought struck, a revelation. Perhaps this wasn't just about confronting the three men, it was also about reclaiming her narrative. The battle wasn't merely against them, it could catalyze a larger shift in her field. They may have thought they were powerful figures, but she recognized that toxicity thrived in silence. Dismantling their game required collective effort, an uprooting of complicity within a system that perpetuated bias. As she took a deep breath, a plan began formulating in her mind, a series of steps to quantify the men's actions, build her case, and bring her supporters into the light. She saw a new path revealing itself, one defined by strength and unity, empowered by shared truth against systemic oppression. The night air filled with possibilities, yet the shadow of doubt still lingered. As excitement melded with apprehension, Sarah wondered if she could truly orchestrate something larger than herself, an endeavor transcending personal ambition into a collective awakening. With her resolve solidifying, the stakes transformed. Not merely her career, but the very landscape of her field was on the precipice of change. Yet as her phone buzzed once more, beckoning her attention, she recognized the impending urgency. What new challenge awaited her? The time had come to act, yet a lingering voice whispered, "Will they fight her back?" Tension coiled tightly within Sarah as she opened the message, a knot of anticipation forming in her stomach. Because now, her small ripple could become a roaring wave, or it could crash before taking flight. The rhythmic tapping of her heart echoed in her ears as she read the latest message from one of her allies. "I'm in. Let's meet tomorrow at noon. We need to be prepared." The words were a lifeline, a tether to a hope she desperately clung to, yet with each peep of her phone, the pressure intensified. Sarah could feel the imminent confrontation loom larger, transforming from a distant threat to a tangible reality. The din of the city surrounded her, a constant reminder of the world spinning obliviously by, seemingly indifferent to the storm brewing within her. With her breath steadying, she pocketed her phone and stepped out of the alley, determination narrowing her focus. Tomorrow wouldn't just be another day at the office, it would be a pivotal moment, a sharp turn on the road she had been driving. Her thoughts shifted to the trio, well-respected figures cloaked in authority, who had weaved a web of intimidation. Could she really dismantle their facade? They thrived in the shadows, cultivating a culture that crushed voices like hers. Yet Sarah realized that their power depended on the silence of others. If she could shine a light on their actions, she could expose the very darkness they thrived in. As she walked, shadows stretched across the pavement, interspersed with pools of light. Suddenly, the metaphor of her surroundings struck her. Shadows could only persist in isolation. She too had to emerge from the shadows, willing to step into the light of scrutiny as she prepared to confront them. The vision of her colleagues, all muted under the oppressive weight of fear, tore at her resolve. No more. Reaching the coffee shop that had become her second home, she settled into a corner booth, anticipating the arrival of her first ally. This space had symbolized moments of shared thoughts, comfort, and camaraderie, but now it felt electric with purpose. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, grounding her as she took a moment to draft the agenda in her mind. Each point needed to be precise, targeting the systemic issues while illustrating the men's continuous disregard for ethical boundaries in their research. The meeting began with only her and one ally, Lisa, who sat down, wide eyes filled with both concern and eagerness. "Sarah, are you sure about this?" Lisa's worry masked a hint of admiration. The question hung heavily between them, laden with the weight of unspoken fears. "I am," Sarah replied, steadying her voice. "We can't keep waiting for someone else to make this change. It has to start with us." As they mapped out their strategy, Sarah dissected their findings, counting the ways in which each man had crossed ethical lines and ensured the system's complacency. Their conversations flowed seamlessly, ideas blending into a tapestry of strategies. They envisioned different scenarios, anticipating responses and potential tactics for their own defense against inevitable pushback. By the time their discussion had ended, Sarah felt emboldened, yet self-doubt lurked, a shadow in her peripheral vision. What if this meeting did more harm than good? The truth was, the risks were monumental. But for every moment of fear, she found a counterbalance in the heartbeat of purpose resonating within her. Back at home, with her mind racing, she laid out a plan for the next day. Who would present first? What data would carry the most weight? But beyond the logistics, a singular question pressed down harder than any other. What if they retaliated? Alone in the eerie quiet of her apartment, she stared at the night sky, reflecting on just how much was at stake. Comfort and stability from her previous life hung precariously in balance, yet a new fire burned fiercely in her core. To refuse to act would be to surrender to a status quo that stifled others' potential alongside her own. As sleep danced just out of reach, she glanced at her reflected visage in the window. Sarah realized she was no longer merely a participant in a system designed against her. She had become a disruptor. Tomorrow she'd confront the machine head-on. Would courage vindicate her choice, or would it unravel into chaos? The phone buzzed once more, a text flashing in her line of sight. She opened it with bated breath. Text box, opening doors to unseen dangers yet to come. The ground beneath her was shifting. She was not just stepping into the light. She was prepared to shake it. The soft light of dawn crept into Sarah's apartment, illuminating the chaos she had left untouched. Papers littered her desk, graphs, unethical findings, other professionals' assessments, each representing a piece of her plan to expose the corrupt trio. She wiped her clammy hands on her jeans, her heart racing anew, the stakes higher than ever. As she readied herself for the day, she couldn't shake the gnawing unease inside her. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders, the anticipation mingling with fear. Would her actions truly lead to the change she hoped for, or would they seal her fate? Fighting the temptation to retreat into the comforting familiarity of complacency, she began to visualize the meeting. Each of her colleagues had a role, a voice, and she had to ensure they felt empowered to speak. This wasn't just her fight, it was theirs too. At the conference room reserved for the meeting, Sarah settled in early, wanting to absorb the atmosphere. The sterile walls felt suffocating, yet their bare presence also served to remind her of the higher calling she had embraced. The room lacked warmth, much like the ethos of the men she was about to confront. When her allies filtered in, she offered them steady smiles, but inside, her pulse thudded in anticipation. It was Lisa's presence that grounded her, a reminder that they weren't alone in this endeavor. As each person arrived, they collectively shared silent nods of resolve. "Let's begin," Sarah spoke, drawing everyone's attention to the agenda she had painstakingly crafted. The points were structured, displaying facts and figures that not only illustrated the ethical breaches, but also the shared repercussions they had fostered. Every word that flowed from her mouth felt like a challenge, a call to arms against shadows that had loomed far too long. As she observed her colleagues, gauging their reactions, a flicker of uncertainty tried to creep in. Would the truths they unearthed empower them or frighten them? As the presentation progressed, Lisa presented her findings, her voice rising in conviction as she detailed the dismissive behavior from their antagonists. A spark ignited in the room. Sarah saw nods of understanding and agreement, their collective frustration coalescing into strength. The shift from fear to empowerment was palpable, invigorating her purpose anew. But it wasn't long before the door swung open. 3 figures, the men she had dreaded facing, entered with a chilling air of authority. Their casual confidence was a sleight of hand designed to unearth fear. The room shifted instantly, and the tension ballooned. The moment had arrived. "Interesting notes," one of them remarked, a smirk playing on his lips, dismissing their efforts with a wave of his hand. "I'm surprised to see such passion in a safe place like this. Sarah felt the atmosphere constrict, the air thick with a newfound threat. Yet safe place echoed back in her mind. Had this meeting transformed from strategy to survival? The shadows they represented clung heavily around her. She could almost hear their laughter, a cruel reminder of the power they wielded. Passion often breeds innovation, Sarah countered, finding her voice rising above their sneers. It's high time for transparency in this organization. You can't ignore the evidence. A sound rippled through her allies. They were with her. It was not just her words, but their presence, their collective stakes in this reality. In that moment, Sarah realized something profound. Her voice had become an amplifier, resonating through this previously disempowered space. They couldn't press her into silence. They had too much scrutiny behind them now. Their unrelenting grip on power was beginning to feel more brittle. But as the men's eyes narrowed, she understood that her boldness wouldn't go unchallenged. With adrenaline surging through her veins, her resolve solidified. She would return to this point of conflict, unveiling their misdeeds while facing potential retaliation. Would the courage grow, or lead to her undoing? As the confrontation escalated, Sarah sensed the room shift once more. A tidal wave of uncertainty loomed, but so did a fierce determination to dismantle the illusion of control that had overshadowed them for too long. And then came the twist, a bold revelation hidden among the shadows of discussion. Who among them had connections to an ally on the inside, a figure who might flip everything on its head? Just as realization pierced through, the ground beneath her shifted again. What she thought she knew could very well unravel, bringing forth a new layer of danger. The moment of truth had arrived. What was to come next could either illuminate their path or spell their doom. The confrontation reached a boiling point, and all eyes turned to Sarah, expectant yet fraught with tension. Her pulse felt impossibly loud, a booming drum announcing her every doubt and determination. Each breath was a reminder that this was no longer merely about exposing corruption. It was a fight for their collective integrity, for the very foundation of their professional existence. The man who had mocked her passion stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "You think this is just about a few ethical breaches?" he sneered. "People have been trying to bring us down for years, and what have they accomplished? Nothing." His tone dripped with condescension, and Sarah felt the room thicken with their collective apprehension. She clenched her fists, not to fight but to ground herself. Instead of retreating, she adapted. She had to shift gears. This was not merely a battle of facts and figures, but a battle of wills. They needed unity, and her voice had to transcend their intimidation. "We're no longer powerless bystanders. We have a responsibility to act and demonstrate that accountability matters. If that seems threatening, perhaps it's time to reevaluate what threatens the integrity of this organization," she shot back, her voice steady, strong. An unexpected wave of encouragement swept through the room as her colleagues exchanged glances filled with a newfound determination. This was it. They were forging a pact, a collective stand against the fear that had held them captive for too long. Sarah could feel their energy shift from trepidation to resolve as they collectively leaned into the confrontation. "We have data," Lisa added, her voice rising amid the tension. "We have testimonies. We are willing to take this outside these walls, to the people who truly care about ethics, because this is about more than our careers. It's about professional morality." In that instant, something unfolded within Sarah. A realization that the fear of failure or retaliation had begun to dissipate. The air was alive with the possibility that they might actually prevail. Yet a barely audible voice in the back of her mind questioned the strength of their conviction. Would they stand together if the fallout became personal, direct? Before she could lose herself in spirals of doubt, a shift occurred. One of the men, initially smug, faltered. A crack in his veneer of confidence just for a moment revealed the underlying fear that perhaps this time they weren't just facing a few disgruntled voices. They were confronting a coalition fueled by shared experience and frustration. However, that flicker of vulnerability was notably fleeting. With the same air of authority, the man straightened his posture and spoke again. "Cogent arguments are worthless if they lack backbone, a spine that's willing to face consequences." He turned sharply, gesturing to his associates. You shouldn't play with fire unless you're prepared to get burned. A chill swept through the room, and Sarah felt as if ice water had been thrown directly over her resolve. What consequences were they truly prepared to endure? Did she have the fortitude to lead them into the line of fire? The prospect of retaliation loomed larger than ever, and inwardly she wrestled with despair threatening to creep back in. She tore her gaze away from him and sought the faces of her allies. In their eyes, she found not just solidarity, but an acknowledgement of the stakes. For the first time, she felt connected to them. This was a profound bond forged from a shared aim, a shared fight. Each of us stands to lose something if we don't act, Sarah declared, her voice unwavering as her heart raced. But we have stood in shadows for too long. It's now or never. If we're challenged, we fight back, together, for transparency, for accountability. At that moment, she realized the desire to expose the truth stretched beyond professional boundaries. It tapped into her deepest need for justice, for integrity. This fight was no longer confined to the sterile walls of the conference room. It transcended into their lives, a mission that could redefine them. Just as she thought they were solidifying their resolve, a cacophony of footsteps reverberated down the hallway, echoing ominously. Sarah's heart sank. What if the confrontation reached further into their lives, deeper into the shadows they sought to dismantle? An unexpected intrusion could change everything, destabilizing their meticulous plans in an instant. The loss of control gnawed at her. It was a reminder that even the most meticulously crafted strategy could shatter at any moment. As the door trembled in its frame, Sarah couldn't shake the sense that this was only the beginning of a far more dangerous game. Would the next steps bind them together or drive them apart? The tension escalated, the turning point of their collective fate hung in the air. What awaited them was uncertain, yet more daunting than ever before. And as the door swung open, casting a shadow into their midst, Sarah prepared herself for a confrontation none of them anticipated. The door creaked open, revealing a trio of executives, their expressions taut with disdain. The atmosphere shifted, Sarah's heart raced, and a surge of adrenaline coursed through her veins. These men were the living embodiment of the corruption they fought against, and now they had come to silence the uprising brewing within the room. "What's going on here?" The lead executive's voice was cold, and his eyes scanned the gathered team as if assessing an insurrection. Tension thickened further, a palpable wave of fear mixed with determination rippling through Sarah and her colleagues. Would this backlash send them scurrying back into the shadows? "Just a discussion about some concerns we have," she managed, her voice steady despite the thrumming in her chest. Each word felt like choosing her footing on a tightrope stretched over an abyss. "Concerns?" The word dripped from the executive's tongue, dismissive yet loaded with threat. Sarah could see her colleagues gripping the edges of their seats, uncertainty etched on their faces. "This isn't a place for your little rebellions. If you have issues, you take them up with management, not each other." Rising to the challenge, Sarah took a single step forward, the ground beneath her feet feeling both solid and precarious. "We are tired of waiting for management to address the ethical breaches we've uncovered. It's time to hold this organization accountable," she asserted, surprising even herself with the fervor in her voice. Within her, a flame ignited, pushing her to embody the fight for justice that had long lain dormant. The executive scoffed, his face a mask of incredulity. "And you think any of this will end well for you? You really are naive to believe you have any power here." "The true naivete lies in thinking we will remain silent," Lisa chimed in, her voice strong, encouraging. With a resolute stance, Sarah turned to address the room. "We've discovered so much more than just ethical concerns. We have evidence of unlawful activities that extend beyond just our department. If we don't act, we lose everything we stand for, and potentially more." A charged silence fell, broken only by Sarah's softened breaths. Despite the looming threat, her words resonated deeply, catalyzing the resolve of her colleagues. Still, the weight of their decision pressed down heavily. What if their unity crumbled under the pressure? The lead executive stepped into the room, exuding authority as he towered over them. "You want to expose truth? Know that the cost can be severe. Friendship, reputation, jobs, all could be lost if you push this too far." Sarah confronted him, unwilling to let fear invade her voice. What's the price of silence then? You're asking us to turn a blind eye to those who've paid dearly because we were too scared to stand up. How many more will be hurt if we don't act? Their eyes met, locked in a battle of wills. Within that moment, the executives had unknowingly pushed Sarah into a corner of self-discovery. She realized that her resolve now wove through the essence of her identity. Failure was no longer an option. The executive smirked, amused by her idealism. However noble, that belief is dangerous. What happens to your courage when it's time to face real consequences? As he turned to leave, the door suddenly swung shut with a decisive thud behind him. Sarah's breath quickened. She hadn't just been thrust into a fight, she had leapt into the fire. Uncertainty gnawed at her as she watched her colleagues transform their expressions from fear to defiance. This was no longer just an ethical stance. It was a defining moment that would alter the course of their lives. But with the prospect of confrontation stretching unnervingly ahead, questions tangled in her mind. Was her courage enough to weather the storm? How far would they go to protect their integrity, and at what cost? As she glanced around, gauging the readiness of her allies, the room felt electrified, not just by anxiety, but by the burgeoning strength to confront what lay ahead. The next step could either solidify their bond, or threaten to fracture their resolve entirely. The question looming larger in the back of her mind remained unspoken yet undeniable. How much were they truly willing to sacrifice for the truth? The tremor in the air grew heavier, the silence in the room thick enough to choke on. Sarah watched her colleagues' faces contort from uncertainty into grit, each carrying a new weight, the kind forged in flames of adversity. Together they stood on the precipice of a choice that would reshape not only their careers, but their very selves. The question remained, how much were they willing to fight for what they believed in? "Let's do this," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a sharp blade. "If we stay silent, we're complicit. We owe it to those affected by this organization's underhanded tactics, and to ourselves." Lisa nodded vigorously, the embers of Sarah's courage kindling her own. Yet there was still a flicker of doubt among some others. Sarah could see the hesitation in a few faces, the fear of losing their livelihoods becoming a looming specter over them. Her heart ached for them, but she knew she couldn't allow that fear to grip her. This was beyond individual sacrifice, it was a fight for integrity. "Remember, the moment we step outside this room, we become targets," Sarah continued, sensing the need to rally them further. "But remember why we're doing this. We've seen how this corruption destroys lives. Are we going to turn our backs on that?" A murmur rippled through the crowd. A powerful moment unfolded. She could sense their resistance morph into resolve. Sarah decided to lay bare her own vulnerabilities to establish more profound trust. "I'm terrified too, but our silence has worsened the situation for too long. I can no longer stand by. If we fail together." The collective energy shifted, resolve sparked in even the most doubtful of eyes. They shared stolen glances, each person weighing the gravity of their commitment. It was a convergence of shared agony and communal purpose that created an unspoken bond among them. "Let's split up the tasks," Lisa suggested, her voice rising with budding confidence. "We need to compile documents, secure testimonies, anything that substantiates what we know." Sarah nodded, invigorated by Lisa's enthusiasm. As they outlined their plans, a sense of purpose blossomed in the room. It was a small victory, but every little push forward was critical. Who they were on the outside began to reflect the courage growing within them, a fresh alliance formed from the ashes of fear. But moments of clarity can bring unexpected consequences. The more they discussed, the more urgent the sense of pending danger wrapped around them. With each strategy broken into pieces, an entirely new set of questions erupted within Sarah. They had declared war, but were they prepared for the consequences that awaited them? "Are we ready to face retaliation?" Sarah asked, looking directly at her colleagues. "What happens when they come for us? Will we protect each other, or will fear tear us apart?" Her question hung heavy, the gravity weighing down the room once more. "We have to trust each other," Lisa asserted, breaking through the shadows of uncertainty. "This unity we've built, if we can protect it, it will be our strength." Moments passed in silence as Sarah scrutinized the faces before her, measuring the quiet resolve blooming like wildflowers breaking through concrete. Yet beneath her confidence lurked a gnawing anxiety. Doubt crept in, forcefully reminding her of the executive's chilling words. The reassurance from her colleagues could easily evaporate when confronted with actual threats. What if they faltered when the stakes became real? As they finalized their strategies, a sudden sound broke through, the harsh vibration of a phone going off. Sarah's heart nearly stopped as she glanced at the device on her desk, her mind racing with possibilities. Was it a warning? A sign? Her instinct screamed at her to answer, but another chilling thought emerged. Would it be the call that started it all? She hesitated, consciousness swirling with anxiety and determination. Could she rise prepared for what lay ahead? Caught between the safety of ignorance and the peril of truth, Sarah saw the walls of her chosen path narrowing. The time for indecision was running out. With shaking hands she reached for the phone. This moment could either make them or break them, and all eyes were about to be on her. What fate awaited them if she answered? Sarah's fingers trembled as she grasped her phone, the air thick with apprehension. Heart pounding, she took a deep breath, reminding herself of the purpose that brought them all to this pivotal moment. No longer would she waver. This was a defining point of transformation, not just for her, but for her colleagues and their collective future. The screen lit up, displaying a message from Lisa. The executives are talking. We need to gather more evidence. Each keystroke resonated with urgency. This was it. The call to action was clear. They had already initiated their own rebellion, and now they couldn't turn back. With resolve crystallizing in her mind, she nodded to her colleagues, who leaned in, eyes glistening with trust. "We're doing this," Sarah declared. "Let's organize and collect everything we have. If the executives think they can squash us, they're in for a surprise." They broke into strategizing, focusing on specifics. Who would cover testimonies, who would compile their findings, and who would oversee the protective measures necessary for their professional safety. This was no longer just a meeting. It had morphed into an action plan that would equip them for the battle looming ahead. In the days that followed, Sarah watched as her once apologetic colleagues gradually transformed into resolute warriors. What began as hesitant discussions evolved into daily meetings filled with passionate debates and shared ideas. They became more than just individuals with fears. They became a coalition driven by a shared vision of integrity. Moments of doubt arose, manifesting as whispers in the corners of her mind, reminding her of the very real consequences that could arise. But each time, she found strength in the collective spirit she had nurtured. They were doing it together, and that camaraderie fueled her fiery drive. One afternoon, while rifling through testimonies, Sarah encountered a breakthrough. Documents revealing the men's misconduct surfaced unexpectedly. It was a treasure trove of data she could use, solidifying their fight with irrefutable proof. The exhilaration surged through her, an intoxicating blend of fear and thrilling anticipation. Once again, she gathered her allies, each face illuminated by determination. "We have the evidence," she announced, her voice steady and unwavering. "This isn't just a wall of discontent anymore. It's a foundation for change. We have the power to expose this corruption, and together, we're going to do just that." As they prepared to present their findings to higher authorities, Sarah experienced a profound shift within herself. She had become not just an advocate for her truth, but a beacon of hope for her colleagues, transforming from a fragile participant into a formidable leader. The weight of her family's legacy transformed from a burden into a source of motivation. Their spirits transmitted their courage to her as she prepared to confront her fears head-on. The day of reckoning arrived, and Sarah felt a seismic shift in the typically suffocating atmosphere of the corporate office. Every glance exchanged amongst her colleagues pulsed with energy, a bond forged amidst turmoil that strengthened their resolve. Today, they were united, each sharing in their commitment to righteousness. Stepping into the conference room again felt different. Familiarity intermingled with the palpable tension as they pronounced their aim with clear intent. The executives in the room stood as sentinels of a corrupt system ready to dismiss their truths. But Sarah sensed a shift within herself, a firm assurance grounded in solidarity against their oppressors. When the presentation began, Sarah laid forth the evidence with clarity and strength. Each fact and figure was a critical blow to the executive's facade, an unraveling of their carefully constructed web of corruption. As she spoke, the fear of potential backlash melted away, revealing the confidence simmering beneath the surface. And then the moment came. The lead executive, masked disdain chipping at his previously unshakable demeanor, attempted to diminish their findings. But Sarah, emboldened by hope and unity, countered with unwavering conviction, dissecting his arguments with both facts and the palpable truth of their personal experiences. This is not merely a recounting of missteps. These are lives impacted, careers crushed, dreams extinguished because of a culture of silence and intimidation, she proclaimed, her voice steady and unwavering. The room held its breath, the weight of their collective truth hanging heavy in the air as her words resonated profoundly. Recognition of their perilous journey, the price they had all paid, showed on their faces. With each passing moment, Sarah found herself standing not solely for herself, but for the wounded Whispers, for every lost hope entangled within this corrupt institution. She exchanged glances with her colleagues standing steadfastly by her side, each radiating strength forged from collective struggle. And then, it happened. The tension in the room cracked open like the dawn, and murmurs of doubt transformed into whispers of solidarity. "We support this," one colleague spoke up, their voice trembling but resolute. "We'll stand with you, regardless of the consequences." With that, the floodgate opened, and others followed suit. One by one, they pledged their allegiance to the truth they had uncovered. Moments that had once felt heavy with worry now brimmed with resilience. After an arduous confrontation, the finalized agreements were declared. Brutal honesty paved their path home. It was a victory carved out through fortitude and unwavering conviction. The shadowy figures they had once feared were beginning to wither under scrutiny. Sarah walked away from the conference, flooded with an indescribable sense of accomplishment. She and her colleagues had not only unveiled the truths buried beneath the layers of intimidation, but had emerged, transformed and empowered. She felt an extraordinary clarity flood her senses. The battle had redefined her. Profound change coursed through her being. Where there was once desolation, there was hope and burgeoning possibility. This was not just a professional achievement. It mirrored a newfound connection to her authentic self. The weight of familial obligation now felt lighter, transformed into the strength that propelled her forward. As she exited, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the glass door. No longer a captive of doubt, but a commander of her narrative. Rising from the ashes of adversity, Sarah had conquered her fears, dismantled oppression, and emerged triumphant. The journey ahead remained uncertain, filled with more challenges, but knowing she wasn't alone made every risk worth it. In her heart, she understood the urgency. Each voice mattered, and their collective strengths would spark transformation long past this moment. And now, dear audience, this is where you come in. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will inspire your journey toward overcoming adversity. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, ensuring these powerful stories reach others who need them. Comment your reactions and theories about Sarah's journey and the battles yet to come. You need to share your thoughts. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to be part of a community that champions personal empowerment and truth. You have the power to help others tap into their potential. Stand with us.